Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Hello again, everyone, and thanks for joining us for our Sunday show. On the satellite, or first on the warning and watch map, no warnings or watches, but there is a flood advisory out for the Juneau area, the greater Juneau area there, including northern Admiralty Island. For tonight, due to the heavy rains that have been going on there for the last couple of days, 1.75 inches falling at the forecast office in Juneau in the last 24 hours. And some areas seeing more than that falling, such as Sitka had about 2 1/3 inches the same time period. But the flood advisory is out until 5 a.m. Monday morning. And moving along to the satellite out over the Northwest Pacific here, there's a next system out over the western Aleutians, southwest Bering, the low pressure area right here just west of Shemya. A lot of moisture pushing eastward, and this whole system coming eastward is going to more or less change the pattern a little bit here across areas, especially southern Alaska, over the next few days and into next week. One wave developing here, sliding northeastward. That's keeping the heavier rain back in this area with lighter amounts, much lighter amounts off to the east. And this is the old hurricane there that came up across southern Japan yesterday and is now in the Sea of Japan. And forecast to just wash out here over the next several days. Some of the moisture will just kind of shear off to the east across, caught up in the jet stream here and move eastward and then drop off to the southeast. So nothing at all expected to roll up into the Aleutians or Bering Sea. On the GOES loop, I see that train of moisture here from south to north rolling right up into the southeast coast. A lot of areas seeing rain today. Again, rain heavy at times falling, net picking up about 1.15 inches down here. So areas seeing quite a bit of rainfall. Even Wrangell picked up just under 2 inches in the last 24 hours. So quite a wet system there. All that moisture just streaming northward and then pulling back to the west here. A couple of low centers, a couple of waves on the front rolling northward. This one right here looks like another one back down in that area. And then low pressure mostly aloft here, east or southeast of Kodiak Island. That whole thing's going to shift northward and come up over south central Alaska during the afternoon hours. Otherwise, a lot of sunshine today in over the interior. Temperatures into the 70s to upper 70s, some cases 80 degrees is at Fort Wainwright this afternoon. But there were some showers developing, the Sitna Valley rising into the mid 70s, and that was warm enough to trigger some thunderstorms to develop over the Talkeetna as those late this afternoon drifting westward toward the Parks Highway. And some scattered lightning showing up over the mid and lower Yukon, Kuskokwim Delta areas. Right, had the shower symbols. Some of these actually developed into some isolated thunderstorms. Same thing happened over the Seward Peninsula currently going on there. Temperatures in the mid to upper 70s this afternoon. That also warm enough to trip off some thunderstorm activity. Otherwise, the Arctic coast still got those gusty east winds, 30 to 35 miles an hour in gusts. In and around Dead Horse, more of a 10 to 20 mile per hour speed there at Barrow, and then picking back up here on the east side, back into those gusts to 30 or 35 miles an hour at Point Lay. A lot of sunshine out here on the east side, low clouds in on the west side here with those east wind sunshine, and then the low clouds back on the eastern coast. You can see clearing out here along the coast as well, but all this moisture with the next front pushing up into the Pribilofs and the eastern Aleutians. But again, the main rain producing area back out through here, and that'll be moving north or moving eastward as depicted by that trough. That's where the heaviest rain will be coming in. So actually lighter rain in advance of the front here, spreading into the Alaska Peninsula and of course into the Pribilof Islands. The heavier stuff will be along the front and then back to the west a little bit, scattering out again to showers, and then the gusty winds with a low center near the central Aleutians. Meanwhile, this whole upper trough complex here at the surface low will be gradually shifting northwards. That's going to keep it wet along the North Gulf Coast, and chance of rain or showers anywhere here south of the Alaska Range, even into the Copper River Basin. But the main rain band here shifting eastward a little bit here tonight, and then for tomorrow, another couple of waves develop on that front, should pull it back to the west a little bit. So you're going to be back into the periods of rain, possibly moderate or briefly heavy at times there over in the northern panhandle. Still looks pretty wet, but not all that heavy for the rainfall along the North Gulf Coast. Showers Prince William Sound, and again with this upper trough slipping northward, showers will be a little more widespread over south central Alaska tomorrow. Scattered showers, partly sunny skies out to the west. Tanana Valley about the same as today, just maybe a little bit more in the way of some showers, mainly over the White Mountain areas with some scattered thunderstorms. Upper level low aloft now here, kicking off some showers over the up in the northwest here, and also over the Seward Peninsula once again. And no change on the Arctic coast, staying breezy with the clouds at times in over the eastern areas, lots of sunshine and VFR off to the west. And then taking a look at the outlook for Tuesday, most of the system shearing eastward to at least initially, then this will lift northward during the afternoon Tuesday night and Wednesday before it finally moves on out as this front finally kicks things off to the east. But the bulk of the moisture here is going to slide off to the southeast or come northward, but already out of the area there. Rain spreading northward back to the western Gulf Coast here, definitely on the southern coast of the Kenai Peninsula. Very wet day, Kodiak Island for Tuesday, and chances of rain all across Bristol Bay and the southwest interior. Some of that could get on up into the Yukon Delta, possibly by the afternoon. A little more widespread shower and thunderstorm activity possible there over the Seward Peninsula. Otherwise, areas of scattered showers, isolated thunderstorms again, developing from the taller clouds in the afternoon hours over the north central interior, but from the Brooks Range northward staying dry. Variable low clouds again, diminishing in the afternoon hours, but mostly on the eastern Arctic coast. Those east winds are going to keep it mild and dry with clear skies and sunshine, at least through Tuesday, possibly into Wednesday. This low here eventually pushing a little farther to the east, so this moisture will swing up to the Gulf Coast there and bring heavier rain into the area probably Tuesday night into Wednesday. Temperatures this afternoon, south central Alaska, 58 at Seward with some light rain, a little bit, not much. And otherwise upper 60s, northern Cook Inlet, both at Kenai, Palmer, and Anchorage. 73, actually reached 74 there at Talkeetna this afternoon, 63 in Valdez, 75 over at McCarthy, Gulkana at 71. Panhandle, Sitka, with all the rain, still reached 62 degrees today, and Petersburg 63, 59 in Juneau, and 54 at Skagway. Up in the Tanana Valley, 69, not quite 70 there at Northway, but Fairbanks up to 75, 76 in McGrath. Fort Yukon pushed up to 68, and Battles reported at 69 today. Umiat in the North Slope, 51, 39 over at, let's see, Kaparik, 38 at Barrow, 50 degrees though at Atchison, and a 51 at Wainwright, 48 Cape Lisburne, but 63 degrees at Point Hope, 10 degrees warmer than that at Kivalina, 71. Kotzebue, 75 at Buckland, lower 70s here from the Kobuk Valley all the way down to Galena with 74, 67 at Nome, but Golovin was up to 77, 75 at Teller, and even Tin City up to 65, 48 over at Savunga. Down to the southwest, 70s all the way down to Bethel and beyond, with 70 degrees showing up even at King Salmon there, and Leganek 67, Iliamna just 57 with the moderate rain going on in Kodiak, and 60s along the Alaska Peninsula, but the well, both sides into the 60s today, 55 on Alaska, 52 in Nikolsky, lower 50s for the Pribilofs, 59 at Atka. For the lows tonight, near freezing right at Barrow there, otherwise 30s to lower 40s up to the Brooks Range, and then 50s here all the way down from Kotzebue Sound, Kivalina here, right down into Bristol Bay, actually the Alaska Peninsula, lower to mid-50s, mid to upper 50s for the southeast coast, and upper 40s and 50s for south central Alaska and the Copper River Basin. And for highs tomorrow, again, lots of 70s here from Bethel all the way up to Red Dog and Noatak. and then eastward all the way over to Eagle. Could push up toward 80 degrees tomorrow, definitely in and around the Fairbanks area. Fort Wainwright again, Eielson, and over to Fairbanks looks up toward 80 for the highs, and pretty mild in spite of the clouds here over south central Alaska, again in the 60s to near 70 degree range, and about the same here over the southeast coast as you saw today. For flying weather with moisture spreading northward, starting out marginal here over the northern southeast coast and then becoming IFR throughout the day, probably by late morning into the early afternoon. IFR along the North Gulf Coast into Prince William Sound, especially on the west side of the sound in toward Portage. Lots of IFR out here over the Bering Sea, the Alaska Peninsula. Of course, that's spreading in across the Aleutians tonight, the eastern Aleutians, and then trying to break out a little bit there, but looks like much of the chain will be in the IFR. For the passes, Anaktuvuk looks good on either approach tomorrow. Another beautiful day for Adigan as well, wide open on both entrances. Lake Clark and Merrill still vulnerable to marginal VFR in the eastern entrance of both passes, but it'll be VFR off to the west. Same forecast for Rainy. Chance of marginal stuff on the east side, VFR west side. Windy, north or south, VFR. Same forecast for Isabel, except the clouds will even be higher and more sparse there, as well as Mentasta. Tanita, possibly marginal, or the lower conditions will be on the eastern entrance, but looks good through the pass VFR on out to the west. Portage coming down to IFR, especially on the eastern entrance, or both entrances could be IFR, with the east side coming down to low IFR. For the Chilkoot and White passes, again starting out marginal and then gradually becoming IFR during the morning hours. And for freezing levels, 8,000 feet over the Gulf of Alaska, 12,000 feet there, Dixon entrance, cutting up, looks like across Metlakatla. So it's that gradient there, jet stream south to north, following that right up into the area again tomorrow. Little gradient or temperature gradient aloft here over interior Alaska, even the Bering Sea, 8 to 10,000 feet there over the Alaska Peninsula. Icing threats mostly above 10 to 12,000 feet with a high freezing levels going on here. So that's how high you got to get into any rime icing, which will extend from the Alaska Peninsula back to the northwest and areas of for the southern Bering and the Aleutians. And then again, mostly above 10 to 12,000 here for the stuff coming northward into the northern Panhandle and the North Gulf Coast. For the upper wind flow chart, again, jet mainly south of the Aleutians here with this upper low coming eastward, and that's going to kick this thing out finally, but the bulk of it's going to shift on out to the southeast toward the northwest coast of the United States, and then this will drift northward, but still a weak trough's going to drag across this Panhandle for continued wet conditions until about Tuesday, early Wednesday. And at 9,000 feet, come down a few miles from that, southeast 30 to 45 knots here, still pretty brisk over the eastern Gulf of Alaska, dropping back to 10 knots for Bristol Bay, picking up again with the next system coming in, 30-knot winds there, and keep holding on to those easterlies or east-southeasterlies, 15 to 30 there up to the north. And at 3,000 feet, there we go, easterlies 15 to 20 for the Arctic coast, about 20 in areas here through the interior. 25-knot winds getting pretty brisk on the west side of that low, 40 to 45 knots there in the western Aleutians. Southerlies at about 25 here on the east side of that system. Southeast 35 knots there with this low down to the southwest of the Queen Charlottes. Otherwise 20 to 25 knotters across the Gulf and into the southwest interior or Bristol Bay. Turbulence-wise, some leftover moderate chop, winds holding on up there for the eastern Arctic coast into the North Slope, and mostly along or off the coast here for any serious turbulence for the Panhandle. Occasional moderate chop here, mechanical turbulence there, Cape Newinam around Nunivak Island, Tooksuk Bay, on out into the northern Bering Sea. This stuff along and south with a low center in this area, keeping the winds kind of variable and light. And after the break, I'll be back to look at the marine forecasts.
The following program is brought to you by the Ocean Alaska Science and Learning Center, a partnership dedicated to understanding and preserving the marine ecosystem connecting Alaska's national parks through research and education. The pristine wilderness of Kenai Fjords National Park is becoming increasingly popular as a destination for kayak campers. As visitor use increases, so does the interaction and potential for conflict between humans and wildlife. Black bears are abundant along the park's coastline, and park managers are interested in preventing negative interactions and protecting both bears and park visitors. A team of researchers is investigating how bears react to human presence in Kenai Fjords National Park. Steve Partridge, biologist with the U.S. Geological Survey, is one of the principal investigators in this study.
I think the original focus of it was to try to determine how people's activities in the fjords here affect bear behavior, and especially in places like these meadows that are really important, especially early on for bears. Typically they're losing weight right now as before the berries come out, so anything they can get in the way of green vegetation is good for them. So I think what we wanted to initially do is look at how people moving around in the meadows or approaching on kayaks or power boats affected these bears in the meadows. And so what we've done is found bears in these meadows, and depending on where the bears were, we might approach them on a power boat, or we might try to get in on a kayak. But what we're doing is we're with laser rangefinders, we're trying to figure out when the bear notices the person's approach first, and so that would be a distance that we definitely want. And then the next distance we would want, at what point does the bear change its behavior from what it was doing previously, which is generally foraging, to maybe just staring at us now and not eating anymore. And then the probably most important one is, at what point does the bear decide now it wants to leave, it's uncomfortable, people are too close.
Researchers patrolled areas known to be frequented by black bears in early spring. When they sighted a bear, they began a systematic approach, recording the bear's behavior as they drew nearer and nearer.
Bear on the right's watching us too. 205. Yeah.
I'm not sure the exact numbers, but I want to say probably what we'd call the flushing distance, probably averaged right around 100 meters, which I think is fairly consistent.
Since black bears are so abundant in Kenai Fjords, park managers have made efforts to limit human and bear interactions by providing food storage lockers or lines for hanging food on the most popular beaches, and requiring bear-resistant food containers at other locations. Containers can be checked out at the park headquarters in Seward free of charge.
I don't think that this park has had any history of a few, I think, tent destruction cases, but nothing serious where any kind of, injury was involved, I don't believe. So I don't know, it wasn't a safety issue, I think. It's maybe just trying to look and see if we could, as this part of the bay becomes more popular, try to get in ahead of the curve and putting together some really good guidelines for kayakers to try to minimize any disturbance that people may have in these meadows.
The Nuka Bay region, where Partridge's team was working, is the more seldom visited part of Kenai Fjords National Park. It also contains more extensive meadow habitat than the more steep-sided fjords elsewhere in the park.
And these places provide some of the only opportunities they have, or the earliest opportunities they have, to get grass. And a lot of these places that are snow-free, at least back to a little ways. So there's always a little vegetation on the periphery that they can get. So it's definitely important in early season, and just good forage for them, I think. So.
Another part of the study involved monitoring the most productive meadows with time-lapse video cameras for several days with no humans present, then establishing a camp in the meadow to see if the bear's foraging behavior was affected. This data has not been fully analyzed yet. In general, though, Partridge was surprised at how oblivious some bears can be to human presence.
Or there's some misconception about how much bears are paying attention to their surroundings. I think a lot of people think they're really tuned into everything, and they can, they see you at a mile or smell you at a mile. But I think a lot of times, since they're not typically worried about predators, they kind of, get in their own little world, like the absent-minded professor. And boy, I've surprised a lot of bears, and as probably a lot of other people have, without trying it at all. So that was surprising. That I think it's, I think sometimes they're not paying as much attention as you think they should be. you know, you learn out here for sure how difficult it is to try to tease these things out. And I think probably, if nothing else, I think we'll get great data on the approaches. I think we can provide Kenai Fjords with some good information there. And I think a lot of people, if you just tell them that, you know, hey, here's these meadows and there's going to be a lot of bears in there and it's a good area for them to feed, that they'll probably avoid those areas because they don't want to disturb the animals. And a lot of times they just need the information. And so hopefully we'll be able to provide a lot of good basic information on how these bears are using these meadows.
In the end, park managers hope to use the information that Partridge and his co-investigators are gathering to minimize the potential for negative or harmful interactions between bears and park visitors, while maximizing the opportunities for bears to thrive and people to enjoy the wilderness of Kenai Fjords National Park.
I think, you know, we still have a really good chance up here to preserve wild populations of bears, and there's a lot of areas I think that there's really good conservation efforts. So for a bear biologist, this is a dream come true, you know. I mean, there's just a lot of stuff to do up here. So.
All right, winds will be mostly south to southeast, 10 to 20 knots, lightest winds over the inside waters. Still can see 20 or 22 knots here down along the central and south coast, only about 15 up to the north. Then on Tuesday, they lighten up even further, just variable 5 to 15 over the entire stretch of the inside waters areas, and just south to southeast here 10 to 15, mostly southwest of Prince of Wales Island. These all still prevailing southeast for the most part. Prince William Sound variable east at 15, 20 knot easterlies here for the North Gulf Coast. Barren Islands at about 15 on into Camashack Bay. Otherwise, Cook Inlet variable to 10 knots, but 25 knot winds coming out of Turnagain Arm, turning southeast there and cutting across West Anchorage in the afternoon and evening. Pretty light winds here, Shelikof Strait and Kodiak Island. And southeast, but only up to 15 or 10 to 15 knots here along the east side of Kodiak Island. Shelikof Strait, easter variable 10 to 15 knots. 20 knot winds still possible here from Camashack Bay across the Barren Islands into the western Gulf Coast. And small craft advisories are possible here for the central and eastern North Gulf Coast Tuesday. Lighter winds though for Prince William Sound. Bristol Bay, light southeast winds tomorrow. Pretty light here, almost variable to dead calm down along the Pacific side of the peninsula there, and southeast 10 for the Pacific side there, 15 knots southwest of Kodiak Island. Now taking a look at Tuesday, not much of an increase here. Southerlies 15 on the Pacific side of the peninsula, otherwise Bristol Bay east 15, southeast 15 there from Sitkinak to Chignik. Out in the Aleutians, 30 knot winds. Again, that low center right in this area, just north over, actually almost over this zone and then on up into the southern Bering there. So good northwest winds, 25 knots, sustained, higher gusts. Westerlies 30 knots here in the southern zone there south of Adak and Atka, turning southwest 20 knot winds for the Fox Islands. And then on Tuesday, those northwesterlies come eastward here with, excuse me, 25 knot winds, mostly across the Adak-Atka area, diminishing and becoming lighter and more westerly towards Shemya, down to 10 to 15 in the afternoon. And these northwest winds probably catching the western island there in Nikolsky, but pretty light winds, 10 knots from the south or southwest for the eastern island. Dutch Harbor and Alaska and those areas. For the southwest coast there, south of Nunivak Island, Kuskokwim Bay, southeast 20, north of the island, easterlies 20. That'll extend all the way across the northern Bering Sea and include St. Lawrence Island. Lighter winds for the Pribilofs. Then turning northeast, 15 for the Pribilofs on up into the northern Bering and the southwest coast. Again, north of Nunivak Island, lighter northeasterlies, but south of the area could see small craft advisories up to 25 knots at times with 6-foot seas. Northeast at about 20 for St. Lawrence Island. Arctic coast, small craft advisories on the east side and stronger small craft advisories on the west side here, 30 knot northeasterlies, seas running 5 to 7 to 8 feet there. Lighter winds there for the areas from Wales on up to Cape Thompson. And then for Tuesday, that area is still light, but northeast 20 sees at about 6 feet, and 30-knot winds for the western Arctic coast there. Northeast 25 now for the central coast. So we've got small craft advisories here in just about all the zones again. So not much change, kind of holding in a stationary status quo there. For the forecast tonight, northern half of the state looking really good, just those variable low clouds and patchy fog areas there on the eastern Arctic coast with the wind. Rain maybe tapering off, kind of hard to tell exactly where that frontal boundary will line up, but still got moisture rotating northward into the North Gulf Coast with the upper low pulling northward tonight and tomorrow in over southern Alaska. That should increase the chances of rain a little bit. Definitely more rain rolling into the eastern Aleutians, the Pribilofs, and the Alaska Peninsula. The heavier stuff back to the west a little bit. And then it'll catch up on Monday there and stay kind of parked over the peninsula, and maybe a chance of rain reaching the southwest coast during the day Monday, but scattered showers here. And still, this system pulling waves rolling northward, that's going to keep it wet, maybe over the northern panhandle areas. Occasional rain for the North Gulf Coast, but nothing too heavy in the isolated scattered thunderstorms in the White Mountains and Alaska Range, with still sunshine up here to the north, a few isolated showers in the northwest. Again, not much change on the Arctic coast there. Again, the wind's picking up a little bit over what you'll have tomorrow with small craft advisories across the entire area there, but you can see where the gradient's more spread out. Lighter winds, 10 to 20 knots there north of the Seward Peninsula areas, but pretty dry St. Lawrence Island, partly sunny skies, partly sunny again here over the Copper River Basin, especially into the interior valleys there, as in the Tanana Valley, but it's still cloudy and wet down here, and then this will be rolling up the next day. Have a great evening. Thanks for joining us.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.